Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. Staff Sergeant Grant Foster crouched behind the crumbling concrete wall, his M4 rifle steady against his shoulder. The Afghan sun beat down mercilessly on his unit as they surveilled the Taliban compound in the Helmand province. 3 months into his 4th deployment, Grant had learned to find peace in these moments of calculated tension. At 32, Grant carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen too much but never lost his moral compass. His green eyes, weathered by desert sand and determination, had witnessed horrors that would break lesser men. Yet beneath the tactical gear and combat-hardened exterior beat the heart of a devoted father. Back home in North Carolina, his 8-year-old son Oliver waited for his return. Grant's marriage to Samantha Baker had been rocky for the past 2 years, strain evident in their increasingly brief phone calls. But Oliver remained his anchor, his reason for coming home alive from each mission. Grant's satellite phone buzzed against his vest. His sister Vera's name flashed on the screen. Odd timing, but family calls always took priority. He signaled to his squad leader and moved to a more secure position. "Vera? What's wrong?" Grant's voice was low, professional. "Grant, thank God I reached you." Vera's voice trembled with barely controlled rage. "It's Oliver. Something terrible happened." Grant's blood turned to ice. "What happened to my son?" "Samantha's boyfriend, this piece of trash named Daryl Bartlett. Vera paused, gathering strength. "He broke Oliver's arm," Grant said. It was discipline because Oliver wouldn't call him Dad. The world tilted. Grant's vision tunneled as rage flooded his system. "Where's Oliver now?" "Hospital. But Grant, there's more. This monster told Oliver that when you're dead, he'll finish the job." Those were his exact words. "Oliver's terrified, asking for you." Through the static, Grant heard a small, broken voice in the background. "Is that Daddy? Tell him it hurts. Tell him the man said he'll kill me when Daddy's gone." Grant's hand tightened on his rifle until his knuckles went white. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside him. The careful, disciplined soldier remained, but underneath, something primal and dangerous awakened. "Put him on," Grant commanded. "Daddy." Oliver's voice was small, scared. "I'm here, buddy. Are you okay? I mean, beside your arm?" "It hurts real bad, Daddy. And I'm scared. He said when you don't come back, he's gonna—" Oliver's voice broke into sobs. "Listen to me very carefully, Oliver. I'm coming home. Do you understand? Nothing in this world will stop me from protecting you. Can you be brave for just a little longer?" "Yes, Daddy. I love you. I love you too, son. More than all the stars." Grant handed the phone back as his commanding officer, Colonel Kenneth Whitehead, approached. The grizzled veteran had been watching Grant's face and recognized the look of a soldier receiving devastating news. "Foster, what's the situation?" Grant's voice was steady, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "Sir, I need emergency leave. My son's been assaulted." Colonel Whitehead studied Grant's face. In 20 years of command, he'd learned to read his men. Grant Foster was one of his best, smart, reliable, and absolutely lethal when necessary. Right now, he looked like a man standing on the edge of an abyss. "Details, Sergeant," Grant explained quickly, professionally. Colonel Whitehead listened without interruption, his own expression darkening. He had 3 kids of his own. "Pack your kit, Foster. Blackhawk lifts in 5 minutes. We'll arrange transport stateside." "Sir, I appreciate. This isn't charity, Sergeant. This is about protecting our own. That boy is military family, and military family doesn't stand alone." Grant's squad gathered around as he quickly packed his gear. These men had bled together, fought together, saved each other's lives. Corporal Marco Schaefer, Grant's spotter and closest friend in the unit, gripped his shoulder. "Bring hell down on whoever hurt that kid, brother. We've got your back when you get home." As the Blackhawks' rotors thundered overhead, Grant made a silent promise. Daryl Bartlett had made the worst mistake of his life. He'd threatened a soldier's child, and now he would learn why that was a fatal error. The helicopter lifted off into the Afghan sky, carrying Grant toward a confrontation that would test everything he'd learned about war, justice, and the lengths a father would go to protect his son. Chapter 2. Homecoming Fury. 18 hours later, Grant stepped off the plane at Fort Bragg, still wearing his combat fatigues. His duffel bag contained more than clothes, carefully selected items that might prove useful in the coming days. Vera waited in the airport, her face a mask of worry and barely contained rage. "How is he?" Grant asked without preamble. "Scared, in pain, but alive." Vera's voice cracked. "Grant, I saw the x-rays. That bastard didn't just grab his arm too hard. He deliberately twisted it until it snapped. The doctor said it was intentional." Grant's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. "Where's Samantha?" "At home with him, playing the victim, saying it was an accident." "Grant, she's choosing that monster over her own son." They drove through familiar North Carolina countryside, but Grant saw none of it. His mind was already working, planning, calculating. Darrell Bartlett had shown his hand by threatening Oliver. Now Grant would show his. "Tell me everything about this Bartlett character." Vera glanced at him nervously. "He's bad news, Grant. Really bad. Criminal record for assault, domestic violence. Somehow Samantha met him at that bar, where she works part-time. He moved in 3 months ago. Criminal record? Assault and battery, 2 different women. Served 18 months for the second one. Got out last year." Vera paused. "Grant, there's something else. Oliver told me Bartlett hit Samantha too. She tries to hide the bruises." Grant's hands flexed involuntarily. "Why didn't she call the police about Oliver?" "Because she's terrified of him. And because—" Vera's voice dropped. "Because Bartlett told her if she calls the cops, he'll disappear and take Oliver with him. Said no one would ever find the body." The suburban neighborhood looked peaceful as they pulled into Grant's driveway. The house he'd bought with military benefits, painted white with blue shutters, had once represented everything he was fighting for. Now it felt like enemy territory. Grant walked through his front door to find Samantha pacing in the living room while Oliver sat on the couch, his left arm in a cast from wrist to elbow. The boy's face lit up when he saw his father. "Daddy." Grant was across the room in 2 strides, carefully embracing his son. Oliver clung to him with his good arm, and Grant felt the boy trembling. "I missed you so much, buddy. Are you okay?" "My arm hurts, but I'm brave like you taught me." Oliver's voice was stronger now that his father was here. "Where is he?" Grant's voice was deadly quiet. Samantha stepped forward, her own face showing faded bruises around her left eye. "Grant, listen, it was an accident." "Where is he?" "He went to his brother's place." "Grant, please, don't do anything stupid. He said he'll hurt Oliver worse if—" Grant stood slowly, his full height and presence filling the room. At 6'2", with the build of a man who'd spent years carrying combat gear across mountains, he was an intimidating sight. But it was his eyes that made Samantha step back, cold, calculating, and absolutely merciless. "You let a man with a violent criminal record live in my house with my son. You let him break Oliver's arm and threaten to kill him. And now you're protecting him? Grant, you don't understand. I was scared. You should be scared. But not of him. Not anymore." Grant turned back to Oliver, his expression immediately softening. "Hey, buddy, how about you go stay with Aunt Vera for a few days? I have some grown-up business to handle. Are you going to fight the bad man, Daddy?" Grant knelt down to Oliver's level. "Sometimes, son, bad people only understand one language. And your daddy is very good at speaking that language." Vera took Oliver's hand. "Come on, sweetie. Let's get some ice cream and watch cartoons." After they left, Grant turned back to Samantha. "I want his full name, his address, where he works, where he hangs out. Everything. Grant, please don't do this. If you hurt him, he'll come after Oliver." "No." Grant's voice cut through her protests like a blade. "He won't. Because after tonight, Darrell Bartlett is going to understand that he made the worst mistake of his pathetic life. He threatened my son. He hurt my son. And now he's going to learn what happens when you cross a man who spent 4 tours learning how to make bad people disappear." Samantha stared at her husband, seeing something in his eyes she'd never seen before. This wasn't the gentleman who used to sing Oliver to sleep. This was Staff Sergeant Grant Foster, the soldier who'd survived places where civilized rules didn't apply. His address is 1247 Miller Road. He'd He drives a black Silverado with a "Don't Tread on Me" sticker. He works construction for Whitman Brothers, but he's usually at Mickey's bar after 6. Grant nodded, filing away the information. Pack Oliver's things. All of them. He's not coming back here until this is resolved. What are you going to do? Grant walked toward the garage, where his motorcycle waited under a cover. I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Bartlett. A very educational conversation. Chapter 3, Reconnaissance. Grant spent the next 48 hours doing what he did best, gathering intelligence. Years of hunting insurgents in hostile territory had taught him that knowledge was the most dangerous weapon of all. Darrell Bartlett, 38, was everything Grant expected and worse. 2 assault convictions, 1 domestic violence charge that was dropped when the victim refused to testify, and a reputation around town as a man who enjoyed hurting people smaller than himself. At 6'4" and 280 pounds, most people were smaller than Darrell Bartlett. Grant observed from his motorcycle across the street as Bartlett stumbled out of Mickey's bar at closing time. The man was massive, with arms like tree trunks and a gut that spoke of too much beer and too little conscience. He wore a Confederate flag t-shirt and moved with the swagger of a man who'd never faced real consequences. But Grant had seen bigger men fall. Size meant nothing when you understood leverage, pressure points, and the anatomy of fear. His phone rang. Marco Schaefer's name appeared on the screen. "Brother, how's the home front?" "Complicated," Grant replied, never taking his eyes off Bartlett as the man climbed into his truck. "Need backup? I've got leave coming, and Preston Boyer's already stateside visiting family." Grant considered it. Marco and Preston were good men, loyal friends who'd follow him into hell if he asked. But this was personal, and it needed to stay contained. "Not yet, but I might need a favor." "Name it. If something happens to me, Oliver goes to Vera, not his mother. She can't protect him." The line went quiet for a moment. "Grant, what are you planning?" "Justice." "Roger that. But be smart about it. Oliver needs his father alive more than he needs his father in prison." Grant ended the call and followed Bartlett's truck at a distance. The man lived in a rundown duplex in the bad part of town, exactly what Grant expected. Security was non-existent. No cameras, no alarm system, just a screen door that probably hadn't been locked in years. Grant parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, moving through shadows with the practiced silence of a man who'd infiltrated enemy camps. Bartlett's lights were on, television blaring some late-night talk show. Through a gap in the curtains, Grant could see Bartlett on his couch, beer in one hand, what looked like methamphetamine on the coffee table in front of him. Even better, the man was actively committing felonies in plain sight. Grant's phone buzzed with a text from Vera. "Oliver's asking for you. Want to know if you're safe." The image of his son's scared face flashed through Grant's mind. The boy was 8 years old, should be worried about homework and playground games, not whether a monster was going to hurt him again. Grant activated the voice recorder on his phone and moved closer to the window. With practiced patience, he waited and watched. At 2:17 a.m., his patience was rewarded. Bartlett's phone rang. The man answered with a slurred voice. "Yeah. No, I told you the kid's fine. Little bastard just needs to learn respect." "His daddy?" "Fuck his daddy. Soldier boy's gonna come home to a coffin if he keeps running his mouth." "Yeah, I broke his arm. Should have seen him cry like a little bitch. When daddy gets killed over there, me and the boy are gonna have some real serious conversations about who's in charge." Grant had heard enough. He had Bartlett making threats against Oliver on recording, admitting to deliberately breaking his arm, and discussing future violence. Combined with the drugs visible through the window, it was enough to put Bartlett away for years. But prison wouldn't protect Oliver from future threats. Prison was temporary. Fear, properly applied, could be permanent. Grant retreated to his motorcycle and drove home, his mind working through possibilities. He'd spent years studying how to break enemy networks, how to eliminate threats permanently without creating bigger problems. Darrell Bartlett was just another enemy combatant who'd made the mistake of targeting innocent civilians. Back at his house, Grant opened his army footlocker and removed several items: night vision goggles, zip ties, a taser, and a small collection of items that weren't officially part of any military inventory. tools he'd acquired over the years for situations that required creativity. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Samantha. He ignored them all. Whatever relationship they'd once had was over the moment she chose Bartlett over Oliver's safety. Grant set his alarm for 4 a.m. Tomorrow, Daryl Bartlett would learn that threatening a soldier's child had consequences. And those consequences would be swift, thorough, and absolutely terrifying. As he drifted off to sleep, Grant thought about Oliver's question. Are you going to fight the bad man, Daddy? Yes, son. Daddy's going to end the bad man. Chapter 4. The Art of War. Grant woke before dawn with the clarity that came from making an irrevocable decision. He'd spent the night mentally rehearsing every detail of what needed to happen. Years of military planning had taught him that successful operations required multiple contingencies and perfect timing. His first stop was a meeting with his lawyer, Rich Murphy, a former JAG officer who'd handled Grant's divorce paperwork and understood military family dynamics. I need to file for emergency custody of Oliver, Grant explained, sliding the recorded conversation across Murphy's desk. Murphy listened to the recording twice, his expression growing darker with each replay. Jesus Christ, Grant. This is clear evidence of child abuse and terroristic threats. We can have temporary custody by tomorrow. How temporary with this evidence? Permanent. No judge in North Carolina is going to award custody to a mother who chose a violent felon over her child's safety. Grant nodded. Legal protection first, then the personal reckoning. There's more. I want a restraining order against Bartlett. Complete, no contact. Already drafting it. But Grant. Murphy leaned forward. Restraining orders are just paper. Men like Bartlett don't respect paper. I'm counting on it. Murphy studied his client's face. You're planning something. As your attorney, I'm advising you to let the system handle this. The system failed my son once already. It won't get a second chance. Grant's next stop was a visit to his old friend Leon Sampson, who owned a private security company staffed entirely by military veterans. Leon owed Grant his life from an IED incident in Iraq, and it made it clear the debt could be called in at any time. I need eyes on someone, Grant explained, providing Bartlett's information. 24-hour surveillance. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, every habit he has. Leon didn't ask questions. How long? Until I say stop. Consider done. What else? Grant hesitated. If something happens to me, there's an envelope in my house addressed to you. It contains instructions for protecting Oliver. Leon's expression grew serious. Grant, whatever you're thinking, sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to remind him he's not the apex predator in the ecosystem. That afternoon, Grant received Leon's first surveillance report. Bartlett followed a predictable pattern. Construction work until 4 p.m., Mickey's bar until close, home to his drugs and television. Weekends involved visits to his brother Angelo Ward's house, where Angelo apparently ran a small-time drug distribution operation. Perfect. 2 criminals for the price of 1. Grant's phone rang. Colonel Whitehead's name appeared on the screen. Sir, Foster, I just got an interesting call from Base Legal. They tell me you're filing for emergency custody. How's the boy? Recovering, sir, but the threat remains active. Understood. Foster, you're a good soldier and a good father. Don't let anger make you do something that separates you from that boy permanently. Roger that, sir. But Grant had already moved beyond anger. Anger was hot, uncontrolled, likely to make mistakes. What he felt now was something colder, more dangerous. It was the absolute certainty that Daryl Bartlett's reign of terror was about to end, one way or another. That evening, Grant visited Oliver at Vera's house. His son was coloring with his good hand, the cast covered in drawings of soldiers and superheroes. Daddy, are you staying for dinner? Just for a little while, buddy. How's your arm feeling? Better. Aunt Vera says the doctor will give me a new cast in a few weeks. Can you sign this one? Grant took the marker and carefully wrote on the cast. Oliver Foster is the bravest soldier I know. Daddy, Oliver beamed. Am I really brave like you? Braver, Grant said, meaning it. You stood up to a bad man, even when you were scared. That's what real courage looks like. Vera pulled Grant aside while Oliver watched cartoons. The custody hearing is tomorrow. Murphy says it's a formality with that recording. Good. How's he sleeping? Nightmares. He keeps asking if the bad man is coming back. Grant knelt beside Oliver's chair. Hey, buddy, can you look at me for a second? Oliver turned, his young face still showing traces of fear. I want you to remember something very important. Daddy is going to make sure the bad man never, ever hurts you again. Do you trust me? Yes, Daddy. Then stop worrying. Daddy's going to handle everything. As Grant drove home that night, he received a text from Leon. Subject just left bar. Heading to brother's house. Looks like they're planning something big for tomorrow night. Grant smiled grimly. Perfect timing. While Bartlett was busy with his criminal activities, Grant would be busy becoming Oliver's legal guardian. And after that, the real education would begin. Chapter 5. Legal Victory and Silent Preparation. The custody hearing lasted exactly 43 minutes. Judge Patricia Eldridge, a no-nonsense family court veteran with 3 grandchildren of her own, listened to Grant's recording with increasing disgust. Mr. Murphy, I've heard enough. Emergency custody is granted to Staff Sergeant Foster, pending a full hearing in 30 days. She turned to Samantha's public defender. Your client can arrange supervised visitation through the court, assuming she ends her relationship with Mr. Bartlett immediately. Samantha sat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face. She'd lost her son, her husband, and now faced the choice between Oliver and the man who'd brutalized them both. For the first time in months, she made the right decision. Your Honor, she said, standing shakily, I want to terminate my relationship with Mr. Bartlett. I want my son to be safe. Judge Eldridge's expression softened slightly. That's a wise choice, ma'am. The court will revisit visitation in 30 days, assuming you've followed through on that commitment. Outside the courthouse, Grant found Samantha waiting by his truck. Grant, I'm sorry. I was so scared, I couldn't think straight. He said he'd kill Oliver if I called the police. Grant studied his ex-wife's face. The bruises were fading, but the fear remained. Are you pressing charges for what he did to you? I don't know if I can. Then let me help you find the courage. Grant's voice was gentle but firm. Men like Bartlett don't stop until someone stops them. If not for you, then for the next woman, the next child. Samantha nodded slowly. What I need to do? Go to the police station. File a report. Tell them everything. The detective's name is Brian Bartlett. No relation to your boyfriend. He specializes in domestic violence cases. What about you? What are you going to do? Grant's expression didn't change. I'm going to pick up my son and take him home where he belongs. That afternoon, Grant and Oliver walked through their house together, Oliver pointing out all the things he'd missed while staying at Vera's. His cast was covered with new signatures from his classmates, and his fear seemed to be fading in the safety of his father's presence. Daddy, is Mommy coming home too? Grant sat down on Oliver's bed, choosing his words carefully. Not right now, buddy. Mommy made some choices that weren't safe for you. But she loves you very much, and maybe someday things can be different. What about the bad man? The bad man is never coming back here. I promise you that. That evening, while Oliver slept peacefully in his own room for the first time in weeks, Grant received a detailed surveillance report from Leon. Bartlett had spent the day drinking heavily and making phone calls to various criminal associates. He'd also called Samantha 17 times, leaving increasingly violent voicemails about what he planned to do to Grant when he caught that soldier boy alone. Perfect. More evidence for the prosecution, and more justification for what came next. Grant's doorbell rang at 11:30 p.m. Through the peephole, he saw Detective Brian Bartlett, still in his rumpled suit for what had clearly been a long day. Sergeant Foster? I'm sorry to bother you so late. I just finished taking your ex-wife's statement. Grant stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind him. How bad is it? Bad enough to arrest him tonight. Domestic violence, terroristic threats, child endangerment. Between her statement and your recording, we've got enough for multiple felonies. Where is he now? That's the problem. He's in the wind. Left his place around 9 p.m. with a bag and his brother. My guess is they heard about Samantha's police report and decided to make themselves scarce. Grant felt a familiar tactical alertness settle over him. Bartlett was running, which meant he was now unpredictable and potentially more dangerous. Detective, with respect, How much experience do you have tracking armed and dangerous suspects? Bartlett smiled grimly. About as much as you'd expect from a small-town cop. What? Because Daryl Bartlett isn't just running. He's planning something. Men like him don't just disappear when cornered. They escalate. What do you suggest? Grant looked back at his house, where his son slept safely under his protection. I suggest you find him before he finds us. After the detective left, Grant made 3 phone calls. The first was to Leon, asking for expanded surveillance to include Angelo Ward's known associates. The second was to Marco, who was now stateside and could provide backup if needed. The third call was to Colonel Whitehead. Sir, I have a situation. The subject we discussed has escalated beyond local law enforcement capabilities. Explain. Grant briefed his commanding officer on the latest developments, including Bartlett's apparent flight from law enforcement. Foster, are you requesting assistance? Negative, sir. I'm requesting permission to handle this using enhanced methods. The line went quiet for a long moment. Sergeant, I didn't hear that request. But I will say this. A father has the right to protect his family by any means necessary. Do you understand me? Roger that, sir. Grant hung up and walked to Oliver's room. His son was sleeping peacefully, one small hand clutching a picture of them together in uniform from Grant's last promotion ceremony. Daryl Bartlett had made this personal when he broke Oliver's arm. He made it war when he threatened to kill the boy. And now he made it a hunt by running from the consequences of his actions. Grant had spent 4 tours learning how to hunt dangerous men in hostile territory. Daryl Bartlett was about to discover that home terrain offered no sanctuary from a predator with the right training and motivation. The hunt was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. Grant's phone buzzed at 3:17 a.m. with an encrypted message from Leon. Subjects located. Abandoned warehouse complex on Route 49. Multiple vehicles. Appears to be drug operation. Advise extreme caution. Grant dressed quietly in dark clothing, tactical boots, and a Kevlar vest he'd forgotten to return after his last deployment. His loadout was simple but effective. Glock 19, tactical knife, zip ties, night vision, and a small collection of less lethal weapons. Before leaving, he checked on Oliver one last time. His son slept peacefully, unaware that his father was about to cross a line that separated civilization from the savage justice of military operations. The warehouse complex sat in an industrial area that had seen better decades. Grant parked his motorcycle a mile away and approached on foot, using abandoned buildings and overgrown lots for concealment. Years of urban warfare had taught him that patience was often the difference between mission success and body bags. Through his night vision scope, Grant counted 6 vehicles and at least 8 individuals moving around the main warehouse. Bartlett's black Silverado sat prominently in the center of the complex, confirming Leon's intelligence. Grant's earpiece crackled softly. Overwatch is in position, Leon's voice whispered. His friend had positioned himself on a water tower 400 meters away, with a sniper's view of the entire complex. Copy. Rules of engagement. Minimize civilian casualties. Everyone else is a hostile. Grant moved closer, using shadows and industrial debris for concealment. Through a broken window, he could see the operation clearly. Drug packaging, money counting, and weapons visible throughout the space. Bartlett stood near a table covered with what looked like methamphetamine, arguing with his brother Angelo about something. Told you we should have killed that soldier boy when we had the chance, Bartlett was saying. Now the cops are looking for us, and his brat can identify me. Shut up and focus, Angelo replied. We move this product tonight and disappear. Mexico, maybe Florida. Plenty of places to start over. I ain't running from some army boy. I'm going to settle this score first. Grant's blood chilled as Bartlett pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Even from his distance, Grant could see it was a school flyer with Oliver's class photo on it. Kid goes to Riverside Elementary. Easy target. Take him out. Send Daddy a message. Angelo grabbed his brother's arm. Are you insane? Killing a soldier's kid? Every cop and federal agent in the state will hunt us down. Only if they find the body. Grant had heard enough. These men were planning to murder his 8-year-old son. The rules of engagement had just changed permanently. He activated his throat mic. Leon, prepare for dynamic entry. Multiple hostiles planning to target Oliver. Copy. Green light. Grant moved to the warehouse's main entrance, a rolling door that was slightly ajar. His military training took over completely as he shifted into combat mode. These weren't civilians anymore. They were enemy combatants threatening his family. The first sentry never saw him coming. Grant's tactical knife found the base of the man's skull with surgical precision, dropping him silently. 2 more guards were neutralized with equal efficiency before Grant reached the main floor. Inside the warehouse, chaos erupted as Grant's presence became known. But these street criminals had never faced a trained special operations soldier in his element. Grant moved through them like a force of nature, non-lethal takedowns for the small players, more permanent solutions for anyone who reached for a weapon. Bartlett scrambled for a shotgun, but Grant was already inside his reach. The weapon flew across the room as Grant's combat knife found Bartlett's wrist, severing tendons and making the hand useless. "You threatened my son," Grant said quietly, pressing the knife against Bartlett's throat. "Please, man, it was just talk. You broke his arm. You said you'd kill him when I was dead. You had his school photo." Grant's voice was absolutely calm. "Those aren't just words. That's planning a murder." Angelo tried to circle behind Grant, but Leon's voice in his earpiece confirmed what Grant already knew. Second target down. Clean shot. Grant looked into Bartlett's eyes and saw exactly what he'd expected. A coward who'd spent his life terrorizing people weaker than himself, now facing someone who understood violence on a completely different level. "Here's what's going to happen," Grant said. "You're going to confess to everything. The assault on Oliver, the domestic violence against Samantha, the drug operation, all of it. You're going to plead guilty to every charge and accept whatever sentence they give you. And you're going to spend every day for the rest of your miserable life grateful that I let you live. And if I don't," Grant's smile was colder than an Afghan winter, "then I'll show you what I learned about making people disappear in places where the Geneva Convention doesn't apply." Chapter 7. Justice Served Cold. 20 minutes later, police sirens filled the night as Detective Brian Bartlett and a tactical team surrounded the warehouse complex. Grant had made one call before their arrival, an anonymous tip about a major drug operation in progress. Darrell Bartlett sat zip-tied to a chair, his wounded hand bandaged with strips torn from his own shirt. Around him, the evidence of his criminal enterprise was laid out perfectly for law enforcement. Drugs, money, weapons, and most importantly, the school flyer with Oliver's photo and Bartlett's handwritten notes about taking care of the soldier's brat. Grant had disappeared into the shadows before the first police car arrived, but his work was thorough. Every piece of evidence told a story that would put Bartlett away for decades. Conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine, possession of illegal firearms, and most damning of all, written plans to murder a child. From his observation position a quarter-mile away, Grant watched through binoculars as the arrests unfolded. 6 criminals taken into custody, enough drugs to qualify for federal trafficking charges, and Bartlett bleeding and terrified in the middle of it all. His earpiece crackled. "Clean sweep," Leon reported. "All hostiles neutralized or in custody. 0 civilian casualties." "Copy." Extraction complete. Grant made it home before dawn, showered away any trace of the night's activities, and was making coffee when Oliver wandered into the kitchen in his pajamas. "Morning, Daddy. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, buddy. How's your arm feeling?" "Better. Can we have pancakes?" As Grant mixed batter and listened to his son chatter about school and friends, his phone buzzed with a text from Detective Bartlett. "Anonymous tip led us to major drug bust. Your problem is solved. Charges include planning to murder a child. He's never getting out." Grant deleted the message and focused on Oliver's pancakes. Justice had been served, swift and thorough. But the real victory was the sound of his son's laughter, free from fear for the first time in months. Later that morning, the local news reported the arrest of 8 individuals in what they called the largest drug bust in county history. Darrell Bartlett was identified as the ringleader, facing multiple federal charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. Grant's phone rang. Marco's name appeared on the screen. "Brother just saw the news." Interesting timing. Sometimes justice finds a way, Grant replied carefully. Indeed it does. How's Oliver? Grant watched his son playing in the backyard, his cast covered in superhero stickers. He's perfect, safe, happy. That's all that matters. Give my regards to the little soldier. That afternoon, Samantha arrived for her first supervised visit with Oliver. She looked healthier already, the constant fear gone from her eyes. Grant, I heard about the arrests. Is it really over? It's over. Bartlett will spend the rest of his life in prison. You and Oliver are safe. Samantha broke down crying, months of terror finally releasing. I was so scared, so stupid. I almost lost Oliver because I was too frightened to think clearly. Fear makes people do things they never thought they would, Grant said gently. What matters is that you found your courage when it counted. Will you ever forgive me? Grant considered the question carefully. For Oliver's sake, yes. He needs his mother, but it's going to take time to rebuild trust. I understand. Thank you for protecting him when I couldn't. That evening, after Samantha's visit ended and Oliver was asleep, Grant sat on his porch with a beer, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. His phone showed missed calls from reporters wanting to interview the hero father whose testimony helped bring down a drug ring. But Grant had no interest in publicity. The real victory was simpler and more profound. His son was safe, sleeping peacefully in his own bed, no longer afraid that monsters would come the night. Vera joined him on the porch, bringing her own beer. So, how does it feel to be a hero? I'm not a hero. I'm a father who did what fathers do. The police are calling it the break of the century. Anonymous tips, perfect evidence placement, criminals caught red-handed with written plans to murder a child. Almost like someone with military training orchestrated the whole thing. Grant took a sip of his beer. Sometimes criminals are just stupid enough to incriminate themselves. Vera studied her brother's profile, and sometimes justice wears combat boots. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell over the neighborhood. Somewhere in a federal holding cell, Darrell Bartlett was learning that terrorizing innocent families carried consequences he'd never imagined. And in a small bedroom down the hall, Oliver Foster slept without nightmares for the first time in months, protected by a father who understood that some battles were worth fighting, regardless of the cost. Chapter 8. Aftermath and Revelations. 3 weeks after the warehouse arrests, Grant received an unexpected visitor. Colonel Kenneth Whitehead stood on his front porch in civilian clothes, wearing the expression of a commanding officer conducting an unofficial visit. Sir, this is unexpected. May I come in, Sergeant? Grant led his commanding officer to the living room, where Oliver was building an elaborate Lego fortress on the coffee table. You must be Oliver, the colonel said, kneeling to the boy's level. Your daddy tells me you're quite the brave soldier. Oliver beamed with pride. I'm building a castle to keep the bad guys out. Daddy taught me about defensive positions. Colonel Whitehead smiled. Essential tactical knowledge. Carry on, soldier. After Oliver returned to his construction project, the colonel's expression grew serious. Grant, I've been following the news about your local drug bust. Remarkable police work, they're saying. Yes, sir. The community is much safer now. Indeed. I also received an interesting call from Detective Brian Bartlett. Seems he's curious about certain aspects of the investigation that don't quite add up to standard police work. Grant maintained his composure. Sir, professional takedowns, advanced tactical planning, evidence arranged with military precision. The detective has a theory about civilian contractors helping with the operation. And what did you tell him, sir? Colonel Whitehead's smile was barely perceptible. I told him that sometimes exceptional police work just looks like military operations. I also mentioned that Sergeant Grant Foster was on base that evening, attending a mandatory briefing about his emergency leave paperwork. Grant understood. His commanding officer was providing him with an alibi while acknowledging exactly what had happened. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Sergeant. I'm here because your situation has attracted attention from higher up the chain. Some people are asking questions about missing equipment reports and whether certain military assets might have been repurposed for civilian operations. Grant's blood chilled. What kind of attention, sir? The kind that recognizes sometimes good soldiers have to make difficult choices to protect their families. The kind that results in certain equipment discrepancies being written off as administrative errors and certain surveillance reports being classified under family protection protocols. I'm not sure I understand, sir. Colonel Whitehead stood and walked to the window, where he could see Oliver playing in the backyard. Let me be clearer, Sergeant. Your son will never be threatened again. Not by criminals, not by anyone. Because word has gone out through certain channels that Staff Sergeant Grant Foster and his family are under protective observation by people who take family protection very seriously. What does that mean in practical terms? It means that if anyone ever threatens Oliver Foster again, they won't just be dealing with local law enforcement. They'll be dealing with a network of military professionals who believe protecting military families is a sacred duty. Grant felt a weight he didn't realize he'd been carrying begin to lift. How many people know? Enough. Marco Schaefer has been reassigned to Fort Bragg. Leon Sampson's security company just received a lucrative contract for base protection services. Several other veterans who might have been involved in hypothetical protective operations have found their services suddenly in high demand. The message was clear. Grant's actions hadn't gone unnoticed, but they've been understood and approved by people who mattered. What about Bartlett? Federal prosecutors are calling it the most comprehensive domestic terrorism case they've ever seen. Written plans to murder a military dependent. Enough evidence to charge him under anti-terrorism statutes. He's looking at life without parole. Grant nodded. And his brother? Angelo Ward was found dead in his cell 3 days ago. Apparent suicide, though the details are classified. It seems he couldn't handle the prospect of spending the rest of his life in federal prison. They watched Oliver through the window for a moment, the boy now incorporating action figures into his fortress defense scenarios. Grant, what you did was illegal. It was also necessary, perfectly executed, and absolutely justified. Sometimes the system fails, and when it fails to protect innocent children, other systems activate. Are there any ongoing concerns? None. Your record remains spotless, your security clearance intact, and your family safe. Consider this a professional courtesy from people who understand that soldiers don't stop being soldiers just because they come home. After Colonel Whitehead left, Grant found Oliver in the backyard, practicing the self-defense moves his father had been teaching him. Daddy, who was that man? A friend, buddy. Someone who wanted to make sure you're safe. Am I safe now? Really safe? Grant knelt beside his son, looking into eyes that still held traces of childhood innocence despite everything they'd witnessed. Yes, Oliver, you're really safe now. The bad man is gone forever, and there are good people watching out for us. Because you're a soldier? Because you're my son, and nothing in this world is more important than that. That evening, Grant received a final piece of news that closed the last chapter of their ordeal. Samantha had been approved for unsupervised visitation, having completed domestic violence counseling and maintained her separation from any criminal associates. More importantly, she'd found the courage to testify against Bartlett, providing the final pieces of evidence needed to ensure his conviction on federal charges. Grant's phone rang one last time. Detective Brian Bartlett's name appeared on the screen. Sergeant Foster, I wanted to give you an update. Darrell Bartlett pled guilty to all charges this afternoon. Life without parole. He won't ever threaten another child. Thank you, Detective. Justice served. Indeed it was. And Sergeant, I don't know how, but I have a feeling your family's safety was never really in doubt. Grant smiled as he ended the call. Some battles were fought in courtrooms, some on foreign battlefields. But the most important battle he'd ever fought was won in a warehouse on a dark night, when a father's love proved stronger than a predator's malice. Oliver was safe. Justice had been served, and the monster who dared to threaten his family had learned the hardest lesson of all. Never underestimate what a soldier will do to protect his child. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, Grant stood in the courthouse once again, but this time the atmosphere was celebratory rather than tense. Judge Patricia Eldridge was finalizing his permanent custody of Oliver, and for the first time since returning from deployment, Grant felt truly at peace. Sergeant Foster, the judge said with a warm smile, In my 20 years on this bench, I've never seen a father more deserving of custody. Oliver is lucky to have you." In the gallery, Oliver sat between Vera and Samantha, all three of them beaming. Samantha had transformed over the past months, attending therapy, finding a better job, and most importantly, rebuilding her relationship with her son through consistent, supervised visits that had gradually expanded to unsupervised time. "Your Honor," Samantha said, standing, "I'd like to say something for the record." Judge Eldridge nodded. "Please proceed." "Grant saved my son's life, and probably mine too. I made terrible choices that put Oliver in danger, and Grant fixed what I couldn't. He's an incredible father, and Oliver should be with him permanently." Grant was surprised by the gesture. Their relationship would never return to what it had been, but they'd found a way to co-parent that put Oliver's needs first. After the hearing, the extended family gathered at Grant's house for a celebration dinner. Oliver wore his newest cast. His arm had healed well, but he'd broken it again playing soccer, this time like any normal 8-year-old having too much fun. "This cast is way cooler," Oliver announced, showing off the signatures from his entire class. "And it doesn't hurt at all." Marco and Preston had driven down from base for the celebration, along with Leon and several other friends who'd become part of Oliver's extended military family. The boy was thriving in an environment where he was protected, cherished, and treated like the young soldier his father was raising him to be. "Speech," someone called out as Grant stood to refill drinks. "No speeches," Grant protested, but Oliver jumped up on a chair. "I want to make a speech." The room quieted as the 8-year-old cleared his throat dramatically. "My daddy is the best soldier in the whole army and the best daddy in the whole world. He teaches me to be brave and strong and to protect people who can't protect themselves. And he promised the bad man would never hurt me again, and he kept his promise because that's what daddies do." The room erupted in applause as Oliver jumped down and hugged his father fiercely. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Oliver was asleep, Grant sat on his porch with a beer, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. His phone buzzed with a text from Colonel Whitehead. "Congratulations on the custody ruling. Well deserved. By the way, your next deployment has been canceled. Seems the Army needs good fathers at home more than it needs soldiers overseas right now." Grant smiled. After 4 tours, he was ready to focus on being present for Oliver's childhood rather than fighting wars in distant countries. Vera joined him on the porch, as had become their evening tradition. "So, what's next for you two?" "Normal life, I hope. Little league, homework, school plays. All the things I missed during deployments." "And Samantha?" "She's found a good counselor, a decent job, and most importantly, she's learning to be the mother Oliver deserves. We'll never be together again, but we can be good parents together." "Any regrets about how you handled Bartlett?" Grant considered the question seriously. "None. He was planning to murder my son. I did what any father would do. I protected my child using every skill I had, even if it meant crossing some lines. Especially then. Some lines exist to be crossed when innocent children are in danger." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their peaceful neighborhood. No more monsters in the darkness. No more threats against innocent children. Just a father and son building a life together in a community that understood the value of protecting its own. Grant's phone buzzed one final time with a message from an unknown number. "Daddy, I'm texting from Aunt Vera's phone because I forgot to tell you something important. I love you more than all the stars in the sky and all the fish in the ocean and all the soldiers in the army. You're my hero, Oliver." Grant smiled as he typed back, "I love you too, buddy. Sweet dreams." As he prepared to go inside, Grant took one last look at the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, other fathers were standing guard over their families. Other soldiers were protecting innocent people from those who would do them harm. But tonight, in this small corner of North Carolina, one little boy slept safely in his own bed, protected by a father who'd learned that the most important battles weren't fought on foreign battlefields, but in the quiet moments when good people stood up to those who threatened the innocent. The war was over. The good guys had won. And Oliver Foster would grow up knowing that when monsters came calling, his daddy would always be there to send them back into the darkness where they belonged. Grant Foster, Staff Sergeant, United States Army, and most importantly, father to the bravest little soldier he'd ever known, locked his front door and went to check on his sleeping son one last time. In Oliver's room, moonlight streamed through the window onto a peaceful face that no longer knew fear. On the nightstand sat a photo of father and son in their matching army caps, both of them smiling at a camera held by a proud aunt. Grant kissed his son's forehead gently and whispered, "Sweet dreams, buddy. Daddy's got the watch." And in a house filled with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bond between a father and son, all was finally right with the world.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will